Hiragana hi. These last few hiragana in lesson 6, including hi, are going to use some different imagery. They're kind of exceptions to the pieces and rules that we put together so far, but they should be easy enough to remember. Hi is actually fairly easy to remember. It looks like that. And the first image that might come to your mind when seeing this is a grinning face of somebody going hee 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 hee, right? Doesn't look for that? Hee 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 hee. And also, you see how it's tilted to the side? How can you remember about it tilted to the side? Well, Japanese people a lot, when they laugh, they go hee hee hee. They'll tilt their heads to the side. Not all Japanese people, but often young women. So, let's spell some words. Himo. Hiki. Can you sound it out? Himawari. Good job. For hiragana ya, let's write it like this. Okay, so we have a puppy dog's tail. We have the index finger from I Want You, from U.S. Army Uncle Sam poster, and then a walking stick. So imagine that we have our grandfathers when we're telling all about this lovely new puppy that we have. Oh, it's so adorable. Talking about the puppy, talking about the puppy dog's tail. But he wants to yawn, but politely, he, holding on to his walking stick, he politely does this and covers his yawn with his index finger. Yawn. So use that image, or something even more vivid, if you can imagine it. What works best for your imagination is the right answer. All right, read this. Yamato. And now, try this. Sakuya. And now, what about this? Yahari. Good job. For hiragana se, let's think of a seance. So, here we see two daggers with their hilts joined together. So think of some interesting story for why the leader of this seance has these two fascinating haunted daggers, these magical daggers that are connected by the hilt, and that they go in the center of the table and they help to summon the spirits, and they all talk to each other with the ghosts in the seance. Now we can spell some more words. We can spell a lot of words now, can't we? Arimasen. Setsu. Se. Hiragana ka. So what do we think of when we hear ka? Well, I think of a car. Or like a New Englander might say, a ka. So to write it, we do this. The last part is a familiar puppy dog's tail, and the other part here, notice by the way that the curved stroke came first. This looks like a dagger, except like a dagger with a fancy hilt. This fancy hilt is not too dissimilar from that of a saber. So we're just kind of extending these lines out. It looks kind of like the hilt of a saber, doesn't it? Like a fencing saber. And now we have, of course, the puppy dog's tail over here. So, ka, we have in our cars, and we are in our cars, and we're in traffic. When we're in traffic, we really want to get the other guy who's in our way, and we just feel like lashing out in some way. But we're more civilized than that. We won't use primitive or weapons or anything uncivilized like that, like Obi-Wan might say. Instead, we will use our sabers, our fencing swords. And so you are next to the person who's in your way, and instead of telling them off, of course we're in Japan, so conveniently on the right side of the car, so if you're right-handed, you can just stick your right hand out, assuming you're right-handed with your fencing sword, and then you try to lash out at the other person in the other car. But the back window is open, and as the car of the enemy moves forward, the dog who's in there had his head out the window, turns around because he's afraid of the sword. Oh no, buddy! You slashed the poor puppy's dog tail and it falls off. The poor dog. It's a terrible, sad image. So let that story sink in. To remember ka. And now let's spell some words. Manaka, mukae, kannon. Hiragana mi. Immediately we hear that and we think of meat, or at least I do. So, what kind of meat is good? Kangaroo meat. Of course. So if we look carefully, the first part here, our seven dwarves, who are throwing boomerangs, right, that part down there, and they're throwing boomerangs at kangaroo to take them out. Makes sense, the perfect weapon in the outback. And then their little daggers, here's the dagger, their little dwarf daggers, they're carving up the kangaroos for some delicious meat. Now we can spell a few words. Mikan, nakami, nomimasu. For hiragana fu, I like to think of Mount Fuji. So here's how we write it. Puppy dog's tail, a 2, another puppy dog's tail, and another puppy dog's tail, like that. So, what we have here with our beautiful Mount Fuji is this kind of image where we have, of course, the mountain, like that. At the top, right when you get to the top of Mount Fuji, you may not know this, but there is a puppy dog's tail, which marks the gate at the top, right before you get to the end right there. There is a hiking trail that goes all the way down the mountain, one of 2 primary hiking trails. The other's on the other side of the mountain, and this is the second one of 2 of them. Remember our 2 from before. And then, flanking both sides of the mountain are 2 temples made of puppy dogs' tails also. So imagine we have these 3 puppy dog's tails and the 2 hiking trails up Mount Fuji. And an important note here is while we spell this with an F, it's really not an F. So we'll go over this in another video as well, but learn this now. It's not an F sound. F sound is made with the incisors, with the teeth, touching the lower lip. Fu, for example. Fu, if we pronounce it like an English word. Fu, right? That is not a sound that is natural in Japanese. The equivalent of this, instead, for Japanese, is to bring your lips together and to whistle poorly. Who cannot whistle? Good! If you can't whistle, try right now. Try to whistle. You go. That's this sound. They could have written it with anything. They could have written it, instead of with an F, they could have maybe written it with an HU. But let's like, hu. So they decided a long time ago to go with F, and that is what is stuck. Although sometimes the Japanese, when they write in Romaji, in Roman letters, they'll write it HU because they certainly don't hear an F sound. They think it kind of sounds like an H sound to them. Romaji are terrible. The point is get rid of Romaji as quickly as possible so that we can learn our proper hiragana and use that instead. Much better for the Japanese language. let us learn some new words. First, let's start with, okay, funsui, sofu, hifu. Our last hiragana is wo. Most of the time, it's actually pronounced o, and it only has one function in Japanese, which is a grammatical marker, the direct object particle, which we'll learn about in a different time. So wo is really the dictionary way of pronouncing it, but o is how it normally gets pronounced. Though don't confuse it with the other o that we learned before. So it's not used to spell any words, it only has that one direct object marker function, which if you're brand new to Japanese, don't worry about right now, we just need to learn the hiragana. So what does it look like? Looks like that. So, for wo, I think of Otto, the bus driver from The Simpsons, saying, "Whoa, little dude," that sort of thing. Who is he saying it to? He's saying it to Bart, of course, his kind of friend. And why is he saying it? Because Bart, mischievous as ever, decides to do his terrible mean prank. He takes a dagger, 2 daggers, and shoves them into the big toes of Otto. And he's like, "Whoa, little dude, whoa!" And it's, of course, very painful. The bus derails, it goes off a cliff, but everybody's fine because it's The Simpsons. And there you go. That's how you remember wo. As I mentioned, not used to spell any words, so you just have to remember how to write it. Now we're going to learn the voice mark. Voice mark's really easy in Japanese. It's just 2 lines, looks like quotation marks. In fact, for this reason, because they look so much like quotation marks and they're used in words like this, quotation marks in Japanese are usually instead written with half brackets. That's what a quotation marks on both sides of a word would look like in Japanese. Say we're putting quotes around the hiragana a, it would look something like that. But for now, we just need to know what this voice mark is. Well, what does it do? We're going to learn about it in another video. But what it does is it changes the sound of the hiragana from, for example, hiragana te. If you want to voice te, what does that mean? It means it goes from te to de. Te and de. Very similar sounds. We just add a little ting ting, these little marks, and we make the sound de. What about something like, let's see, let's do another one. So there's sa, if we want to make it za, voice mark. Or if we want to do some other words here, here's some examples. Sange, instead of sanke, sange. Zen, like the meditation, right? Zen. Instead of sen, we hit the voicing markers there, which makes it zen. Zoku, instead of soku, becomes zoku. Mabo. Suzuku. So, an interesting thing is that if we have a hiragana, for example, hiragana shi, we're going to see that if we voice it, it becomes ji. But if we have chi, it would also become ji. These sound exactly the same. No difference between them. Even though without the voicing marks, shi and chi do sound different, but ji and ji, they both sound the same. We would write them with a J-I in Romaji. With Suzuku, when su is voiced, it sounds identical to a su when it gets voiced. These two also equal each other. That's supposed to be an equal sign. So, Suzuku, Dobu, Giji, Go, Bi. So now we have the H ones. Whenever we have the H's, which were, to go over them, I'll write them up here. Ha, hi, hu, he, ho. In that order. If we voice them, they all become ba, bi, bu, be, bo. Very economical system. So that makes this gobi, guzu, baba. That's the voice mark. We'll talk about that more in a different video. For now, just remember what it is. The last piece of hiragana to learn is the plosive, or the P mark. It looks just like a little circle, almost like a degree mark. And it's only used for the H, is the H series of hiragana. Ha, hi, hu, he, ho. When we voice them with the voice mark, before it made them ba, bi, bu, be, and bo, which we saw last time. However, let's get rid of these. And now to these 5 hiragana, and only to these 5 hiragana, we can add the plosive mark. Now they are pa, pi, pu, pe, po. And that's how we can get a P sound in Japanese. Here are some examples. Repeat after me. Kanpai, enpitsu, senpu, inpei, pokari. Congratulations, you've done it. This is the end of lesson 6 and of all of the hiragana. We, in this lesson, looked at hi, ya, se, ka, mi, fu, wo, and the voicing mark and the plosive mark. With this, you've done it. Using creative imagination, you have found a way to learn the hiragana far faster than if you had to write them one by one. Fantastic.